How can I transition from feeling anger and suspicion due to past narcissistic abuse to a state of compassion and gracefully maintaining my boundaries? So I actually have a 4-part video series on this topic. It's called Narcissism and Attachment Styles, and it focuses on the 4 different types of narcissistic presentation. And it also offers a couple different experiential activities that you can use to establish boundaries and recover from narcissistic abuse experientially. So I will include a link to that playlist somewhere in and around the replay of this video. But for today's segment, I thought we might tackle this question in 3 parts. So number 1, how do we recognize the impact of narcissistic abuse in our own experience? Number 2, taking a look at the confusion that we may have between compassion and self-abandonment. And then also, how do we clarify our boundaries and our needs? So I invite you to grab a pencil and paper because you're going to want to take notes for this one if this resonates with you. And just be sure to stick with me until the end. All right, so let's just dive right in. The first question, how do we recognize the impact of narcissistic abuse in our own experience? So I would say probably the most disruptive and confusing thing about recovering from narcissistic abuse, or even from our own narcissistic wounding, is the sifting and sorting through the emotional chaos that we tend to be left with. And that can be exacerbated by our hypervigilant nervous system, which is super sensitive to things like attachment threats and triggers. So this might look like feelings of isolation, dissociation, or what's called depersonalization. It's kind of like you're living on the outside of your life looking in. You might freeze up in intense fear in the face of what might be a relatively benign disagreement. You might struggle to make decisions for yourself. There can be a pervasive feeling like you've always done something wrong. There could be unexplained physical symptoms like appetite changes, nausea, stomach pain, muscle aches and fatigue, insomnia, maybe immune deficiency issues, and so on. There can be a general sense of restlessness or anxiety in your body. You can feel disconnected from yourself or confused about your identity, feeling like you don't recognize who you really are. Maybe you struggle to set boundaries, or you tend to shut down and say no to everything, right? So either you're saying yes all the time or you're saying no all the time. There can also be feelings of profound sadness, hopelessness, and depression. There's a grief process that occurs here. And so at the root of this, usually there's a feeling like you've lost yourself, or maybe you didn't really have a sense of self to begin with, outside of being a character in somebody else's life. So recovering from narcissistic abuse requires establishing that sense of self. And so that means exploring what you like and what you don't like, connecting to the sensations of your body so that you can feel fully present in the moment with yourself, leaning into your intuition, trusting your own decision-making, and so on. And so the result of that, cultivating that sense of self, means that you feel more integrated. You're more actively engaged in your own life, and there's a deeper sense of belongingness. You can remain composed and communicate effectively during a disagreement without feeling like you have to run away or close up. There's clarity and self-assurance when making decisions independently. You're able to carry a baseline feeling of being right with yourself without having to justify some feelings of guilt. Maintaining a stable appetite, not having those psychosomatic symptoms anymore, having restorative sleep, and feeling like your energy is more consistent and predictable. Being able to assertively say no when it feels right, and then saying yes when something really does align with your values. And just overall having a sense of meaning and hopefulness and a positive and optimistic attitude towards life. Sounds amazing, doesn't it? So how do we get there? So as I mentioned, I do have a 4-part video series that walks you through this step by step. But for now, I want to address the biggest hurdle that a lot of individuals who've experienced narcissistic abuse face, and that is the attachment narratives that they have, which tell them that if I define myself as a separate and autonomous individual, that's unsafe, because it could lead to my mental, emotional, or even physical annihilation, depending on the degree of abuse that they experienced. And this is usually because there may have been a narcissistic partner, but if it's particularly severe, it's likely they chose that partner because there was a narcissistic parent, and they would have been punished in some way if they were to try to express their individual self. They call that individuating, right? If they were to try to individuate from their parent. And so they get stuck in this place of believing that being compassionate, loving, attached, and bonded means that you have to sacrifice yourself to the other, because you cannot both exist, so to speak, in the same mental, emotional, and even physical space. And this is why a lot of survivors of narcissistic abuse can also present as rescuers in their relationships, or they can get tied up in codependent relationship dynamics. Now, if you want to learn more specifically about rescuer dynamics, I do have a 2-part video series on YouTube. It's called How to Stop Being a Rescuer in Love. And I'll also link that up in the replay to this video. But for now, let's move on to the next step, which is clarifying the difference between compassion and self-abandonment. So what is compassion versus self-abandonment? So when we're confused about our boundaries, typically we tend to believe certain things, that feelings are only acceptable if they are pleasing or positive. To meet my own needs, I have to be alone and by myself, or I have to be willing to accept the bare minimum from someone else. If I want something for myself, then I'm abandoning or betraying someone else. My needs are a burden or unacceptable, and I don't really have a right to them. True love requires suffering and self-sacrifice, and it has to be their needs or mine. Someone is always giving or taking more than the other. So just let me know in the comments there if any of these sound familiar, or if you can connect to some of these underlying beliefs that we might have. So these beliefs reflect an attitude of self-abandonment because they remove you from the equation. It requires you to have no needs, to have no boundaries that define those needs, so that you are in complete subservience and service to the other, which is what a narcissistic partner requires. And if you're unwilling to accept that, well, then you believe that you have to accept being completely alone. But compassion requires you to show up as your fullest self and still be present with someone else's fullest self. So compassion is an acceptance of self and other, and it makes room for both of you to coexist. It also requires feeling connected to your emotions. So this sounds more like, my feelings are my friends and they keep me well informed. Meeting my own needs includes establishing safe and loving connections with others. Saying yes to myself is not saying no to you. It just invites you to know the real me. My needs are valid no matter what, and I will honor them no matter what. If it feels like a sacrifice, then a boundary of mine is being stimulated, and I should review my threshold for compromise. So arriving at this compassionate attitude and feeling what I call a self-sovereign state requires clarifying our boundaries, because boundaries are really the spokespeople for our needs, and your feelings clue you into what your needs might be. Okay, so let me know in the comments if any of this is resonating with you. I'd love to know. And let's move on to the third and final aspect of this. So how do we clarify our boundaries and our needs? Okay, so let's return to the original question. How do I stop feeling angry and suspicious and start feeling more compassionate? Well, first we have to accept, in this case, we have to accept that you're totally justified in feeling angry and suspicious, and let yourself have those feelings. You may not have been allowed to feel them at some point, right? And as you allow yourself to feel those feelings, notice, what are all the voices coming up in response? They may say things like, well, being angry and suspicious is unattractive and it's threatening to others and it's going to prevent you from finding love. Then notice the part that actually feels angry and suspicious and how in response to that, it just digs in even deeper in response to those retorts. And that's because you have two needs going on, and you have an attachment belief that interprets those needs as being in conflict. So the needs are, I want love and I want to feel safe. But because of your history, you have a belief that being in love requires being unsafe, and being safe requires being alone. So they cannot coexist. And these beliefs, they have to be named, and then they have to be systematically deconstructed, because it is possible to feel safe in love, and it is possible for you. Okay. And accomplishing this means cultivating our boundaries and our discernment when it comes to our needs, and listening to your body and your emotions as signposts, pointing you towards the people that are most likely to meet them. Someone where it is safe to allow those loving feelings to grow. So in the playlist that I mentioned before, we do a step-by-step exercise to walk you through this experientially, but today we're just going to break it down into 5 steps. And this particular process is just the cliff notes on a lesson that you go through in my Attachment 101 courses. I believe it's lessons 1 or 2 for those of you that are my students. So I want to break it down into these 5 overarching steps. So number 1, you're going to identify what you don't want. So in this case, I don't want to feel unsafe. What's the opposite of that? Number 2, I want to feel safe in loving relationships. Number 3, recognize the feelings associated with those wants. So I want to feel safe because I want to feel playful, creative, fun, exploratory, connected, and generous. These are all unique and nuanced energetic experiences moving through your body. That is what emotions are. Anything you want because you think you will feel a certain way when you have that thing. And a feeling is a nuanced energetic experience moving through your body, which we label with feeling words. Okay, so I want to feel safe, playful, creative, fun, exploratory, connected, and generous. So what's the deeper need if those are the feelings that you want to feel? Well, I need to experience more stimulation, vitality, and relaxation in my life. Okay, so let's add in, that's number 4. Number 5, let's add in some specifics here. And when I say specifics, I'm referring to positive action language, meaning you're looking out into the world and you are observing without evaluation the people, places, and things in your life that serve as a focal point or as a means of curating the type of experience that will stimulate that emotional experience for you, that nuanced energetic experience for you. So for example, well, I know that when I encounter someone who has a good sense of humor, speaks to me like an equal, asks me questions about myself, does things for me without requiring some kind of emotional or material payment, takes my opinions into consideration, and follows through on their promises, I feel safe and loved. So then the boundary statement would be, I need to experience more stimulation, vitality, and relaxation in my life because I want to feel playful, creative, curious, and connected. If someone lacks humor, speaks down to me, is apathetic to my desires and my wants, is only giving me something when they can feel they can expect something in return, ignores my thoughts and my opinions, and breaks their promises, then I know I am not likely to get my needs met with them, and I will not commit my time, energy, or resources to that person. Right? Let me know if any of this resonates with you. I'm going to say that last part one more time. I know that I am not likely to get my needs met with them, and I will not commit my time, energy, or resources to that person. And once you go through these steps, any confusion created by attachment anxiety can be sorted, so long as you commit to honoring your needs and your boundaries, both in word and action. Because a partner's response to your clarity is less likely to be ambiguous in that case. But even if it is, now you get to recognize ambiguity as a clear no, because it is still falling short of meeting your needs. And so you want to trust that in this case, rejection is protection that the universe is providing you, and it is trying to make space for something better and more clear to come in. It's also compassionate to where you are on your path and to where they are on theirs. Because if you start bending yourself and abandoning yourself because they don't know or they're not able to meet you where you're at, you've twisted and contorted yourself and you're no longer honoring your boundaries or your needs. So those are our 3 things. Let's review this one more time. So the question was, how can I transition from feeling anger and suspicion due to narcissistic abuse to a state of compassion and gracefully maintaining boundaries? So number 1, we want to recognize the impact of narcissistic abuse in our own experience. Number 2, we want to clear up the confusion between compassion and self-abandonment. Remember, compassion makes room for both individuals to have their individual experiences and to share space and contribute to each other's experience at the same time, right? And thirdly, we want to clarify our needs and our boundaries using this 5-step process, identifying what you don't want, and then looking at the opposite of that to recognize what you do want, looking at the feelings associated with those wants, which point you towards the deeper need that those feelings represent, and then adding in any specifics that will provide clarity around what in your environment is going to facilitate the curation of that experience. So I hope that was helpful. I'd love to see there in the comments if that was helpful to you. I'd love to see how this is landing with you. Also, remember to subscribe and ring the bell for notifications. I put out videos once a week and I wouldn't want you to miss out.